Welcome to What's Trending. This is the show where we talk about everything you've been seeing online. With me today is Candice Holdsworth. Candice, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I think we obviously do the TV circuit. I think we've only actually worked together like once or twice, but I've met you in green rooms thousands of times and now we're drinking pals. So I'm so excited to have
Yes.
you on the podcast with me.
Yeah, we always have loads to talk about as well.
We do.
Always.
And I think, when you do television, you're always worried about that commercial break. So podcast, we can take our time a little bit more
Yeah,
today.
exactly.
Right, let's jump into the first story. So the first story is the Iran conflict, obviously. So much to talk about this. It's dominated the news quite rightly for almost a week now. I wanted to talk about with you, because we're both parents, like how are you approaching sort of raising a child and like building a life when the world feels just kind of permanently unstable? Like this is, the latest in a lot of things that have been going on around the world. So what's your approach for not letting it completely consume you and still play with your kids?
You know, that is such a good question. And no one ever talks about it, parenting in a time of crisis, but it's such a real thing. And I think there is just so much pessimism right now. Whereas having a child is an act of optimism, right? It's looking towards the future and saying, I think the future is going to be good. I want to have children. They're going to have a future ahead of them. But right now, people feel like they can't even look the next week ahead, right? There's just
Mm,
crisis after crisis after crisis. I think there's two ways of looking at it. There's my personal way, and I think that there's actually, in general, how people are parenting. So I would say the way that I do it is I sort of have my little bubble, I suppose, with my children. And I just try and focus on that. I try and focus on the good. I try not to get too consumed by the news when I'm with them. I mean, obviously, we're both journalists. So, of course, the news does consume us. But I do try to be very present when I'm with my kids, make sure I'm not lost in my phone looking at constant updates, which I think is very, very, very easy to do, not to doom scroll. I think doom scrolling is so important. I think me and my husband both noticed our moods would shift if we would go on X, Twitter, whatever. We saw something that kind of made us go, and we're around the kids and they pick up on it so easily. So we decided none of that. When we're with the children, we're with the children. I think that there's been a lot of interesting research by demographers. I would really recommend people check out Neil Howe. He's a big expert in generations and how they experience different periods of history. And I think one thing he's noticed is that in times of crisis like this, parents become very overprotective. The world feels uncertain. And I think that children's freedom is not necessarily prioritized as much as their safety. And I think I've noticed that as well. I think everyone is worried about the world being less safe. I think children are roaming less freely. I think they have less freedom to explore. People are sort of lamenting what it was like when we were kids, like millennials, and everyone just sort of went out and played in the streets and did all these things. And now children don't do that. And I think that that's a big consequence of parenting because people just don't feel the world is safe. And I'm definitely someone who thinks that children should be free to explore and they need that. It's really important for their development. But how do you do it when everyone around you, all other parents, sort of feel the opposite?
yeah, no, it's so tricky. And even outside of the conflicts that are going on. I mean, there is a real, prospect of a World War III, and that's quite terrifying. And thinking about, and I think, as a parent, you're kind of like, okay, what would we do if we went to war? Like, how are we protecting the kids? What's our source of food? Like, these are honest things that go through my mind of like, okay, how do you purify water? Um, should
Yeah.
that not happen though, it's still not a clear path. Like I have a stepson that's 16 and I honestly something happened the other day. I can't remember exactly what it was. And I was just like, you know what? I don't even know what to advise you anymore. I don't even know. I don't know what career to put you in the direction of because I don't know what AI is going to replace in the next 5 or 10 years. I don't know whether it's worth just putting you on a crypto course or like,
Yes.
I genuinely, it's like
Yeah.
there used to be a path and the paths are getting, what just more and more ambiguous. I just find it really hard to even have a 16-year-old and know what to tell them to do.
Yeah, because there's so much pessimism. And I do wonder if our attitude to AI sort of reflects the mood we're in. People aren't really in the mood to be optimistic or to look for opportunities right now. Everyone's sort of defensive and just thinking of all the costs because that's the period of history we're in. And I
Mm.
think that when I look back to the 1930s, I don't know if it's directly equivalent, but it is another crisis period. I mean, you look at the films that were produced in that period. I mean, that's when you got sort of film noir. It's all about a corrupted landscape and everything's negative and no one can ever really act morally. Everyone's got to sort of be pragmatic and just operate in the framework they're in. And I feel like we're in that time now, right? Like
Mm.
there's no ideal options. You don't feel you can achieve them. I wonder if it will last though. I wonder if we're sort of hitting the nadir now. We're sort of really reaching like the absolute worst of the crisis these next few years. And then maybe afterwards there will be some sort of resolution.
I hope so. And here's my thing. I actually think AI will play a big role in that. I think it's
Yeah.
already democratizing a lot of things like access to personal finance or health. And I think that whilst we are aware that there will be a cost, I do wonder what Brave New World. And look, to be honest, people go through hell. Very few people just throw their arms up in the air and say, well, I give up. Like, because if you get, well, what are you going to do? Are you still going to eat? Like, so just by living, hopefully we will continue moving forward and pushing through, and we will have to work to solve all these problems. I mean, if it doesn't all end in nukes.
Yeah. You've lied. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to, just before we move off of Iran, the one thing that has really fascinated me about war, because I just think everything has had a technological boost, and clearly we're seeing that war has, and we've heard a lot about drones from what's been happening in Ukraine, but I have been fascinated on the Iran conflict of the role drones are playing, and more specifically, sort of the economics of it, that basically Iran has been quite successful at flying these $40,000 drones, and they're costing £1 million to sort of intercept from the other side, and how that has completely sort of changed the game of war, that it can now be sort of cheap and dirty, is actually taking out equipment that costs millions of pounds.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is what all the sort of tech forecasters have been saying. Drone warfare, this is going to be the future of warfare. What's so fascinating is the drones that Iran developed. It was actually an original design. The Americans actually took it and redeveloped it. So, I mean, Iran was obviously thinking a long way ahead about how they were going to fight a war if they needed to. I
Mm,
mean, I think that the big problem they've got now, though, is they're sort of escalating and they're using up all their drones and their missiles, but they can't resupply them. So
no.
what they're going to do then, right? Like they're hoping that if they apply enough pressure, that at the UAE states, all the ones surrounding them are just going to be like, well, this cost is getting too high. But I think that's a very risky gamble for them because they could just run out of munitions.
Yeah, it's a very hard one to put your finger on because just the sort of indiscriminate, like, right, well, we'll just throw some at everyone then. Um, I don't know if that's ever been successful in the history of war. I don't have that degree, but it's an odd play.
Yeah, well, their navy has been destroyed. They have absolutely no air cover. Presumably, the US and Israel have thought 5 moves ahead. So, yeah,
But again, an
not a
odd
great
time to live
strategy.
through. And obviously, your kids are a bit young, and my youngest too young to really know about the news and what's going on. Whereas my
Yes.
16-year-old knows, and
Yes.
often I go on the news like you to do the paper reviews and stuff. I always find it fascinating that my 16-year-old knows the news before I do. So I saw it on TikTok. I'm like, what? Like, it hasn't even broken yet. That's insane.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
but when your kids do come to the age of being aware of the news and these conflicts, like, how are you going to help them navigate this kind of uncertainty?
Yeah, you're going to have to tell me that because that is a whole other thing, right? Like, I mean, it was the same when COVID broke out. My child was 1. If you
Mm,
had teenagers or, just even maybe children who were 9, 10 years old who understood what was happening, that was a whole other challenge, right? Being able to communicate it to them. But I
mm,
think you made a good point. We're not the sole source of their news, right? They go on TikTok.
yeah,
They listen to other people. I mean, that's one thing I've noticed about this generation. They're incredibly well informed. They
yeah.
are immersed in news and information, and they're getting a lot of different perspectives. I think, look, I mean, what can we teach that generation? Maybe what we can teach other generations is, we're sort of the load bearing generation right now. Millennials and Gen Xers, we're raising children, we're holding down jobs, we're paying the majority of taxes. I think what we can teach them is strength and resilience in tough times, right? Like how to keep everything going. And like you were saying, sort of just battle through and survive. And that's all we've got to do now.
Oh, well, on that bleak note, let's move on to the next story. Right, the next story, dancing. How could dancing be depressing? Well, some MPs have made it. So, UK MPs have faced a backlash this week after being filmed taking part in a dance session in Parliament while global tensions were escalating. So to say it promoted well-being, but critics say it symbolises a deeper disconnect between leaders and the public mood. And I think worth saying as well, they've just been given a pay rise, like £100,000 a year. So I mean, these
Yeah.
people are just in a different world. What did you think when you saw the MPs dancing? And be honest, if you weren't bothered by it, that's fine. But I want to know your take.
Oh, well, my first thought was none of them have any rhythm. That does not look suave. Yeah, look, I mean, I probably didn't have as strong a reaction as other people because I know this is going to sound terrible, but I mean, I've become so disillusioned with politics and politicians. I mean, I expect so little of our political class. I mean, I don't think they've served us well on either side of the divide. In many ways, I think that the old order, the old two political parties are crumbling and losing support. And I think for people our age, they're not doing things that serve us well. I think the system is very biased against us in any ways. So I was probably already sort of hard boiled by cynicism. So when I see things like that, it doesn't even make me angry. I'm just like, well, this is what they always do. Like, what do you expect? But like you said, and I think it's true, it's the mood of the time. Maybe if this had been 10 years earlier, it would have been a viral moment and everyone would have laughed and been like, oh, everyone's just having fun. Now people they can't stand it.
I think you put your finger on the like people can't stand the politicians in general. And when I saw it and I read the headline, and I felt this for a while, like your time as MPs is numbered. I fundamentally don't think we're going to run countries like this for much longer. I just don't think this
Yes.
works.
Yeah, no, it
We
doesn't.
there are the idea of elected officials and the way that we run countries, I think worked once upon a time, but it does not work now because you've got two. I think Brexit was a great example where you had MPs that wanted that were in an area that voted to leave, let's say, but they were supporting all the reform stuff. It's like, well, you're not really representing the mood of the nation. It doesn't really matter what you think. You're there to represent people. And there's been stuff like that that's gone on too often, I think. I think another thing is that no one's ever held to account. There's got to be a line somewhere between, look at Liz Truss. I know a lot of people think, well, she really didn't have time to get going and they had it in for her. But just taking that as a bit of a case study, you could do so much damage to the economy and then just walk off. And
Yeah.
that's fine. It's like, oh, but everyone else is dealing with this. Or what was his name? Nick he was the leader of the Liberal Democrats back in the day who said we didn't need any nuclear. And then we had an energy crisis at just the time he said that and it's like there's too many mistakes being made that we're all paying for, and you guys are all able to just wander off. China, they put them in prison. And I'm not saying I want to get to that, but I think that the way that we avoid getting to that is some sort of new system where I think the everyday person votes a lot more than we do. I don't think that we can have an election every 5 years and the person we hate the least gets to run the country for another 5 years. And, if you look at this Labour government, they're not in power because anyone really liked them. They were in power because so many people were so mad at the Tories. And just with the way our electoral system went, they got a massive majority. Interestingly, fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn got. And then they're able to implement an agenda that the wide rest of the country is more against than is for, and then even go for things outside of their manifesto, like trying to bring in digital ID. I fundamentally don't think that we can run like this anymore. And I think that it's time we almost admit that as a society and look for what the next option could be. Otherwise, I think it gets to an ugly, almost civil war type situation.
I think you're right. I think you're so right. I think things are becoming very, very toxic. And I think the things that need to be done They just don't know how to do it, because I think also a lot of the political parties have become very ideological, and they're their own little echo chambers, and they have their own little closed belief systems about the world, and they're not responsive to anything outside of it. And I think many people in politics, what shocked me when I've spoken to them about it, they actually don't trust democracy that much. They don't trust the public that much. They think that they know best and they're going to do what works for them and what's best for them. And we can see now that, like, it's just hitting the wall. That sort
Mm,
of attitude now. Nowadays, people are a lot more well informed. They're a lot better educated than they were in the past. They have much higher expectations for themselves, and they're not going to stand for it anymore. What a new system looks like, I don't know. I think that's a really, really interesting question. I mean, places like Switzerland, people vote on stuff all the time.
yeah.
They have referendums constantly
I
and get
think that
to
that's
voice their opinion.
I think that's what we need. I do think and we've all got phones now. We could all vote on a lot of things, and politicians could almost be the arbiters of we've costed up 3 options or 5 options, and you sort of vote, and then that narrows it down to 2, and then you vote again or whatever it is, so that we can. I got asked recently to go on and do a debate. I couldn't do it in the end about Labour's new education policy, so my views on this actually didn't air in the end. But they were asking me about it, and I was my take on it was like, this is just a waste of time, to be honest. This is a waste of time for a government that's already a year and a bit in to bring in a new version of what they're going to do in education, because they'll be gone in 3 years, and then it'll be someone else's new idea. And I think that this is another thing as well, especially going back to the story before about how uncertain the world is. China and Russia are successful because they think in decades and hundreds of years. We have politicians now that are just thinking about surviving till the May elections. Like, this is no way to run a country. We need long-term plans. And with things like education, or should we have nuclear weapons, or should we have nuclear power, whatever it is, I think you probably need the public to vote on things and say, look, and then it's like, look, we did a referendum on this in 2026. This was direction, and that's it. And I think that the reason we are going to struggle to get to that is because of Brexit, because we almost went for the biggest thing you could try and do with a referendum first. We should have just done domestic things first that were actually in control. Because the problem with Brexit was you also were negotiating with over 20 other countries. It was never going to be so straightforward. Whereas, domestic things, deciding whether we put up some windmills or go for nuclear, like, we are in actual control of that.
Look, I think this is such a good point. And also what I resent as well, just from, the way that I look at the world, is I really don't like politicians imposing their worldview top down.
Hmm.
I want to see what people genuinely value. And I think human beings, we tend to value the same things, even across political differences, political divides. Most people want a really, really good, top-notch, rigorous education for their children. Yet one of the problems we have with, I think, the Labour Party is they bring in people with all these ideological approaches that are just that do not reflect what most parents want for their kids. And once again, it's like I said, it's this distrust of the public, though. It's thinking that the public are stupid and that
Hmm.
they really know better. Whereas I think, where if the public are allowed to express what they want, I genuinely believe you'll just get more common sense stuff, because most people, value the same things. We don't want exactly the same things, but I think that there are similar things that most people want. Most people want prosperity. Most people want hope and optimism. Most people want a damn good education for their children, and they don't want people fiddling with all these things. But that's what I think the political parties do. And so for me, I would much prefer if the emphasis came more from ordinary people sort of saying what they want, and politicians being humble enough to implement that. But you sort of get the opposite attitude, like, well, we're not just servants, we're here to lead opinion. They honestly think that. It's insulting.
It really is. Just by them dancing to celebrate their £100,000 jobs, I think it shows to the public, and I think that's why it's gone down so poorly, because it was almost like dancing on our graves. It's like, you're really taking the mick now. You're being paid more. I mean, the average wage in this country is still like £34.
Yes,
£34, £34,000, and so
I
you're
know.
on, like, almost triple that. Sorry, over triple that. It's insane. It's an insane way to be. And I think, realistically, if you think about it, if you let the majority of the public vote on stuff and you find a way, again, the issue of Brexit was it's 52-48. It wasn't quite quite perfect. But I think you could put in other ways where we don't do things unless we get a really strong majority on the big things. If the majority of the people voted for it and are happy with it, like, you're gonna have a happy public. Like,
Yeah.
because that's what they want, rather than you trying to guess with, as you say, the ideology is quite tough now. But I think it's gonna change, and I think that maybe the rise of the Greens and Reform, whilst in two completely different directions, is showing that, look, people are looking for their sort of wild card now because they don't think this system works.
Yes, exactly. People are sort of looking for strong solutions,
Yeah.
not weak solutions. The center ground is just disintegrating. People are like, no, we have to do it this way. That can also be a problem because then how do we come together to find solutions and resolutions? Maybe at some point there does need to be a crisis for that to happen. That's usually what happens, right? That's what
Right.
brings people together. Well, you would hope it would do that. Then, but I suppose that's more of an external crisis. What you don't want is, and I'm not one of these like Civil War doomerists, but what you don't want is there to be, an internal crisis where the two political sides can't come together and
Yeah.
just can never come together. But I hope that's not going to happen. I'm not one of those people who's like civil war is inevitable. I mean, I don't think that at all.
I think actually the kind of left and the right divide is actually dying down a little bit, because I think some people that went really, really far left have seen that just got Trump in power and Nigel Farage topping the polls. You need to stop being so crazy and come back to the center and actually have a negotiation and a conversation with people. So I actually do think conversation is getting better now. But I actually think it could go the other way, in the sense of, I think for so long, I'd say the last 10 years, there's been this kind of ramping up of tensions between left and right. I actually think what could happen now is kind of the us versus what people see as the elites, the politicians,
Yeah.
the billionaires, and actually be like, nah, we're not here for it. We can't have a world where my kid can't afford
Yeah.
to rent a small mold infested house, but he's on a top notch job. No, there's something's got to, and I think that might be where it all settles, is we're not going to be dictated to by you people anymore. We want real control.
That's so interesting. I almost feel like left and right can radicalize each other. Whenever you see sort of one side going through like an extreme period, the other responds. And
Mm,
we've sort of been in the cycle now for maybe about 10 years.
yeah.
So maybe I would really like some sort of some sort of reprieve from that, from swinging wildly. But I suppose it's going to be like that. We're going through this period now where everything is sort of maybe the old system, right? Like the post World Order, the post World War II order, the Cold War, the things that we've taken for granted, they're all sort of disintegrating. So it is going to feel like this, right? Like where people, I suppose it's also, if we look at it, if we try not to be too pessimistic, it is people reaching for sort of solutions and trying to figure it out in the morass, right? Like so many different things seem possible right now.
Mm. And I do look to play the other side as well. I will say I do think it's a lot harder to be a politician now, because people are so well informed, because people um you know are struggling, in the sense of, they don't have the money that they used to have. They're going to do worse than their parents for the first time, and it's your job. So as much as I think their time is limited in this current role, I do think it's a tough game. I wouldn't want to do it. I don't know why you would do it.
Yeah. I think because our problems are so deep and so much of it requires, radical change, most politicians, no matter where they come from, are going to struggle and people are going to become disenchanted and disillusioned with them really, really quickly, unless you have someone who can just meet the moment and meet it and just be able to do what needs to be done. But I think until, I don't know, maybe we need more millennials and Gen Z sort of getting to leadership positions in politics who can sort of articulate the needs of their generation and of young people, and how young people just feel so stymied right now. I mean, in loads of other countries around the world, Gen Z's just tearing it to pieces. I mean, they're just overturning systems because they've had enough of it. And I think I've noticed that. I've noticed that with people in their 20s. I don't know if you have as well. There is slightly more of a nihilism and an urge to really push the boundaries and
Mm,
transgress. Like they're not invested in the current system at all.
yes, I think that's true. I think it'll be interesting to see where it goes. It could obviously be really great or really bad. I don't know. On that note, let's
Yes.
move on to the next story. The next story. So, the director of the UK's National Theatre has warned that industry's growing tendency to play it safe financially is reducing new writing and limiting emerging voices. The warning reflects a broader pattern across modern life. So, systems that once produced innovation are now increasingly reward and caution. So the idea here is like playing it safe is killing culture. And I'm not just talking about theatre here, but do you think that that's happening?
Yes, and from what I've been told in things like television, that's 100% the case. I mean, I've spoken to editors, directors, producers, and they all say now there is such a risk aversion that nowadays, like a chance won't be taken on an unknown person, for instance. You
Mm,
know, they go for people who are quite well established, who are a name. You know, they make the marketing easy. They make it much less risky proposition, right? To sort of market this new individual. Will the public like them? Will they? Won't they? But what happens is you just end up with the same people doing all the shows, the same
mm,
shows, and like new people aren't bubbling up. They're just not. And also, when they come up with ideas as well, like I was talking to someone who worked for the BBC, and he said, you know, that era of risk taking that you had in maybe the 2000s in television, where television was where it was all happening, right? I mean, there were so many just fascinating programs, groundbreaking programs being made. That's gone. That's just
mm.
gone. They don't do that anymore. And I think that where I think a lot of the creativity is now, it's in the podcast world,
Yeah.
because that's where sort of everyone's gone to take risks. Because in I think the more establishment creative industries like theater, like you were saying, like television, that sort of attitude is just not there anymore. Like we want to do something innovative, we're willing to take a risk, you know, we want to find new voices. That's gone.
I think you're right. Again, it's the world in such a state of flux. I mean, if you look at like anything like TV and film, it feels like we've gone back to the 90s. Like Sex and the City's back, and Star Trek's back, and what else? Devil Wears Prada. The Devil Wears Prada 2 is coming out, and Toy Story 5 is coming. It's all these
Scream
IPs.
7.
What?
I didn't know there was
Scream 7,
7
yeah.
screams.
Right? And it's like, no, it's like, oh, these things people remember from, I think maybe a time when the world was slower. I think maybe, a lot of that stuff was from a time when we only had 4 TV channels. So chances are 1 in 4 people have seen it, or more. So I do understand the kind of, oh, let's go for tried and tested things. But even now, I'll look through like a celebrity section online. I'm like, the majority of people here, 75%, were famous in the 90s. Like, that's wild. Like, where are the new celebrities? Where are the new people? And I think this is the thing where broadcasts now, and I do think some of it comes down to sort of Ofcom and the rules that they have, where
Probably.
podcasts have no rules and YouTube has no, well, it has some rules, but I do think, like, you're right. I think that it's podcasts now and YouTube channels that are really defining culture. And we're seeing that. I think more people are watching YouTube in the UK, like I think it was last month or something, than the BBC. So it's a changing thing, and I think it's just. But here's the thing: is this an economy thing, or is this a lack of will? Because I do think when the economy is tight, people don't have the money to experiment, right? So is it kind of justified?
See, if you're asking me, right, I would say it's deeper than that. I'd say it's a deeper cultural malaise, and I think it's because we don't value free expression anymore. That's what
Right.
I think. You know, I think in like the 2000s, for instance, where you had things like Brass Eye. Could you make that now? You could never make Brass Eye now. You know, you had The Office. I mean, like all these groundbreaking television programs. And I think it's because free expression was highly valued. You know, sort of be yourself, be who you are. I don't think we have that. I think we have quite a stifled culture. You know, it's this safety seeking, risk averse culture. And at some point, maybe we'll start valuing liberty and freedom again. And I think that would be really good for culture and the arts, because I think culture and the arts thrive off that. Like lots of unique perspectives, individuals taking risk, but people don't like that now. Maybe,
Mm.
but in the YouTube world, they do. That's where I think it still exists. So I think that there's always like a little island of freedom. And I think that that's where you'll find it, right?
I think that's great. I agree. I think the two issues on that is one, and I'm trying to figure this out myself now at the moment. Like, is it harder now to break through with a podcast and YouTube because that like there's so much right now. This obviously
Yeah,
was a story about a theater, but even if we just think about UK TV, or you used to be able to make it as a local radio
yeah,
show presenter or something, or do the local news. Whereas if you go on YouTube, you're competing with like um, Diary of a CEO, you're competing with Joe Rogan, you're competing with Megyn Kelly, you compete with all these people that have got huge platforms. And I think the thing they say about podcasts now is like people have already got the 5 to 10 podcasts they listen to. So to make it, you've got to replace one of them. And that's
yes,
really hard to do. So I do think I don't want to kind of like make it out like, oh, well, everyone should just go to YouTube, because I think that people can get disheartened with that as well. Because it's like, eventually, if you're not hitting the subs you need to make, you can't quit your job or whatever it is.
yeah.
Um, and that's an issue. But I also think wider and more collectively, like you and I might see a comedian on YouTube that we're like, oh my God, I can't believe you can get away with saying this. This is insane. Good for him, but not everyone is seeing him. He's not on one of 4 channels. So I think that it's
Oh,
harder to have collective moments now, like especially
yeah.
growing up in the UK. I think, most people remember um what was his name? Richard in Coronation Street trying to kill the whole family. Like there's such a cultural moment. We were all
Yes.
there. We all saw that car go into the canal.
Yeah.
Um I don't
Yeah,
think you get those things anymore.
my mum still talks about Dirty Den. Everyone
Yeah.
talks about Dirty Den. He like lodged in their consciousness.
And I think that while it's good, it's also keeping us quite divided, because the things I see day to day might be completely different to you, and I think
Yes.
that's maybe why people are getting wildly different perspectives on things. Because taking it back to politics, if you're only looking at left-wing commentators or right-wing commentators, you're just like the rest of the world's gone mad. It's
You're
just me,
right.
and so it's hard, because I think the mainstream is supposed to be there, not necessarily to give balance, but to at least put us all on the same page of things that are going on. But it's just, I don't know, they don't want to do that, or they're doing that. Like the mainstream still is there, but people are not watching these shows anymore. Like people are just not
Yes.
showing up for these tired old formats that have become, I guess to your point, like too sanitized now. We can't say that, can't say this.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
There's a lot going on. I mean, so I'm looking at it from a cultural perspective, but like you said, there's also a technological aspect to it. We live in a much more fragmented media landscape now. For a lot of independent creators, they can just carve out a very specific niche. They don't need to appeal to a mass audience anymore, right? Like it's completely viable for them to just appeal to a narrow group of people. But we lose something with that, don't we? We really do. I mean, it's funny when I talk to people, about music and stuff. When I was growing up, it was top of the pops on a Sunday, right? Like the
Mm,
top 40. Now you can mention a musician to someone your age, they're in the same sort of cultural moment you are. And they'll be like, who? I mean, that
mm.
it's so true. We're all inhabiting very, very different universes right now, cultural universes.
And I don't know
And I
if it's
have
making us
noticed when I
happy. I don't think it's making us happy, right?
yeah, you're probably, it's funny when I go to conferences now, I do notice that, everyone will kind of be the same. It's all, and it was funny. I was invited to a conference and the organizer said, I specifically sought out people more on the right because she said, I feel like it's becoming very samey. We all think the same way. And it's actually very boring, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
it is, it's boring. Like you know what? We need that conflict. We need that tension. We need to sort of inspire each other and jolt ourselves out of like our certainty, our very lazy certainty about things. It's important. It's actually really important. Maybe that's also why things can get a bit stale as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think shorter attention spans as well. Talking about watching things, one of the things a concept I was quite fascinated with was this paradox of choice, which is that you and I now, once we finish this podcast, can go on YouTube and watch literally, we've got probably 1 billion videos to choose from, or go on Netflix and there's millions of things to choose on. And you and I both remember a world where there are only 4 channels. And what they said
Yeah.
that does is it puts the onus on you. So if you start watching something and you don't like it, well, that was your fault, because you had everything in the world to choose from, and you've sat here for half an hour. You don't like it, and I think so. Our kind of capacity to stick with something has got shorter and shorter. Did it
Mm.
interest me? Like that I see it on like my YouTube videos sometimes, like people logged off after 3 seconds, like 3 seconds, I barely
No,
said
shocking.
anything. Like, but
Yes.
that is how cutthroat it is now, especially with the shorts on
Yeah.
like YouTube and TikTok and things like that.
Yes.
And so I think it actually makes us more negative. Whereas I think in a time where there are only 4 channels, or there was only one thing on at the theater, or whatever it is, people kind of like, oh, this isn't that great, but I'll stick with it. And we sort of got out of our comfort zone naturally.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like when I go to conferences now, I do notice that older people can concentrate for much longer. You know, they can
Mm,
sit and they can listen to, maybe 4 talks in a row and really focus. Whereas everyone else, we're on our phones, we're looking here, like if it's going on a bit long, everyone's like this. We've lost that ability to concentrate. And like you say, have a bit of patience, stick with something, absorb it. Yeah. And this is a technological thing. This is a consequence of the technology.
yeah.
Definitely.
Well, let's move on to the next story. Right. Stick me with this one. Listeners, and Candice as well, please don't leave the podcast studio. Right, so Mercury retrograde is
Mm,
trending again online. Mercury retrograde has been trending on social media as people discuss relationship confusion and communication breakdowns. Whilst often dismissed as pseudoscience, its popularity may reflect a deeper cultural need for meaning and structure in uncertain times. And that's why I thought that this was an interesting one to talk to you about. So a lot of the things that we talked about today is how uncertain the world is. World War III, what are the kids going to do? AI. There's so much going on that I think, especially in a country that I would say was probably going more atheist, at least a couple of
absolutely.
years ago. Now I mean, keep hearing about Gen Z are going back to church. And then you've got
Yeah.
all these other people. Oh, well, it's the planets. Where do you stand on all this? And what do you think's driving it?
This is so well observed. You're 100% right. But I think it's that people have been noticing that this happened, especially since COVID, since 2020.
Mm,
There's been a huge uptick in interests in psychics, in astrology, in tarot reading. Everyone's into this stuff again. And it's a couple of things. It's like you say, it's uncertainty. So people are looking for ways to sort of understand the world. And I think as well, like, the new atheists, the reign of the new atheist is over. Like that cultural movement is gone. Like the Christopher Hitchens, the Richard Dawkins, all these people who had such a massive influence on the culture. And they were very, very skeptical about religion, astrology, all those sorts of things. That moment has passed. So we're probably moving into a time now where people feel more sort of free to explore these things. Because I remember when I was in my 20s, if you read tarot or you did astrology, I mean, people would just start quoting Christopher Hitchens back at you, or, Richard Dawkins. I mean, you were just silly if you did that. But I think there's like a whole new generation of people coming up who just aren't exposed to these rationalist philosophies anymore. I mean, for me, I don't really believe in all that stuff. I do find it very interesting. And like you said, that Gen Z, and this is documented, are returning to church. They're looking for meaning. And I've spoken to teachers and university lecturers about that who say that they're much more interested in spirituality and religion and the deeper meaning, and also trying to find, I think all of this in some way is in some way trying to find order in the
mm.
universe, right? That the universe has some sort of coherence, that it's, everything isn't just chaotic, that there is maybe some structure to it. I mean, people maybe need to believe that. And, maybe they're right. I don't know everything about the universe. I really don't. And I think that, when times were happier, that the skeptics and the new atheists could be like, well, I love not knowing, because they were actually in a time where things were very stable. But
Mm.
when you're in the time we're in, no, people don't love not knowing. Actually, it's a very unpleasant feeling.
It's so interesting, isn't it? So I guess it's something that
Fascinating.
we expect to keep rising. More Gen Z is going to church and more people looking at astrology. And I mean, I get from my own point of view, I guess where I am, it's sort of like, I don't know. But I think in the will, I don't think I'm supposed to know. I've been popped on this planet, make as much sense of it as I can. If there's a God, and I meet him, I'll be like, oh, I hope you're okay with the whole bisexual thing. Um, but
God, the charge sheet on me will be long.
right. Um, or if there is some grander order and it's all energy and we're all just flowing or whatever, or like
Yeah.
or we could all die and wake up and be like, oh my God, we were in a simulation and we actually
Yes.
we're somewhere. So I just don't think that on my personal thing, I don't think we're meant to know. I don't think I'm one of those people that thinks this is it. I don't know that
Mm,
I think when you die, you're dead. I feel like it would be a lot of fucking hassle if you just died after all this. Like, hopefully I'm here to learn something.
yes.
So I don't know. But as far as sort of taking time out of my day to wipe my crystals or read my Bible, it's not something I spend any real time on. But then maybe as the world keeps getting more crazy, maybe I will throw some salt over my shoulder or whatever. I have people I know that, like, probably aren't really religious, but they'll be like, oh my God, it's a full moon. Oh my God, people go wild on a full moon. I'm not going out tonight because there's a full. I'm like, what? You're not going out clubbing because there's a full moon? Are you serious? But it
Yes.
is it. But I would love to know the demographics of the world at the moment, like how many people are religious versus how many people aren't. I actually probably should chat
Yes.
GPT that later.
There is actually, but I mean, religion does have a kind of enduring beauty. I mean, I was in central London yesterday and I walked past St. Paul's and it was really beautiful in the twilight and there were people coming out from evensong. And I think I can understand the appeal of it, the majesty of it and the beauty of it, and that it's so ancient and it's so old and it does contain so much wisdom, right? I mean, it does. I mean, there's the famous quote from Ecclesiastes, for everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn. And I find myself reading that more and more and more, that particular quote from the Bible, because it makes so much sense, talking about the times we're in, where we see so much volatility and so much change. Um, yeah, I don't know.
I think
Like you
there's
say,
also
there
a
could,
point of hundreds of and thousands of years, depending on what religion you follow, people have lived by these rules and they've been okay. In the sense that no matter what the religion is, they followed these rules. They've been able to have children and to grow old and to live lives that they felt happy with. Whereas a lot of people growing up now are being told up is down, down is up. There's so many different paths you can take that it is all overwhelming, that maybe there is something to, why am I going to listen to you, influencer on the internet? You don't know nothing. Whereas this book has actually guided millions and millions of people over hundreds and hundreds of years and they've been fine.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's 100% right. And I think that religion will tell you how to live your life, right? It'll say to you, make these choices. And most likely, if you make them, your life will be good. It will give you a path. It will give you a path and it will say, stay close to that path. It won't say that, there are endless things that you could possibly do. It will give you a path. And I think a lot of people are drawn to that. But like you were saying as well, there's so many other fascinating things we don't possibly know about the universe. Consciousness is a fascinating thing. There's so much depth to it, so much we don't understand about it. I mean, you texted me earlier and I said, spooky. I was just thinking about you.
Right?
And it happened earlier, like another producer I was thinking she needs to confirm that. And she texted me at the exact moment. And
Ooh.
there are actually physicists who do believe that consciousness, like human consciousness is a lot more connected across people than we actually know, right? So there's so many interesting things that we could think about our existence. It doesn't need to be tethered to a particular religious belief, but yeah, I can understand why people see symbolism in things more, because I think human beings have always done that. The full moon, seeing hearing a screeched owl at night, spotting a rare white deer. I think our brains are sort of primed to look for symbols and meaning in everything.
And I think possibly sort of what we were talking about on the next on the last story about now you can go on YouTube and things. Like if you are on the fence about, like, let's say, so like say about the moon landing, if you were on the fence about that, you can go and watch loads of videos and see loads of people that are either on the fence too or completely think it was made up. Whereas you wouldn't get that in the mainstream. And I think that because people have lived through this time where actually you can find different voices on things, that I think people are more interested in exploring some of the unknowns of the world that the mainstream would tell you isn't there. Like I would listen to the telepathy tapes. It was a podcast about these autistic kids and how, even though they couldn't speak, they were all communicating. And it's,
Mm.
and I'm definitely open to that. It's like, oh, so maybe on some, we know that birds can communicate without speak. It's like, so maybe on some level, if maybe we have more senses than the ones we use. It's just we don't really. It's almost like I think this is a scientific thing, but I heard somewhere before, like when we're babies, we can tell the difference between animals' faces or something like that. Like if you put five
Yes.
pandas in a room, we'd be able to tell the difference. Whereas when you're an adult, that skill's gone because it's not useful. So maybe
Yes.
there are
Yes.
there are more abilities we have that are just not useful to how we live. So we don't really connect with them.
And yeah, the telepathy stuff is interesting because there are actual, scientists, mathematicians, physicists who talk about stuff like that. Like you said, like how do animals who don't have language, how are they able to communicate with each other in the way that
Mm,
they are in a very effective way? I mean, often in quite complex ways. If you look at like wolves, for instance, I mean, the way they cooperate and their strategies that they use to hunt, very, very successful, very in tune with each other. Where does that come from? And it's not explored properly. We actually don't know enough about it. So not all of it's woo. Some of
mm.
it is absolutely on the frontier of what we understand. And, a lot of scientists just won't go any further unless they've got a very specific way of building a model about how it works. But yeah, I mean, maybe we are all searching for new meaning and trying to understand the world.
That's exciting. I think
Yeah.
everything we've talked about today has been we're in a bit of a state of flux. It could all go really bad, but I'm hopeful that it could all go really well and we
Yes.
find new religions and find new purpose and find new abilities and find, conflicts, sorry, new resolutions to conflicts. So let's leave it there on a positive note. Candice, thank you so much for joining me for this.
Thank
I've
you. I
loved it.
enjoyed
I've
it.
loved getting for time with you, not having to worry
Yes.
about an ad break. If people want to hear more from you, where can they go?
So, follow me on Facebook. I've actually got a nice little audience there now. So look for
Oh,
Candice Carey Holdsworth. There's also my Instagram. I'm building that. And I'm actually trying to make my YouTube a lot better. So look for Candice Holdsworth. I'm building that. So if you want to see some of my clips, my broadcast clips, that's the place to look.
thanks so much.
Thank you.
Subscribe for more content.